People are always talking about building relationships. But how do we do that? Are we overlooking the one thing that could be the biggest relationship builder of all? This week, in the Blogcentric podcast, we're going to talk about blog commenting. Welcome to Spiderworking's Blogcentric podcast, a podcast about blogging. Hello and welcome to episode 65 of the Blogcentric podcast. I'm Amanda Webb, and you'll find the show notes for today at spiderworking.com/65. And this week's show is a short one, and it's a bit different because there's something I'm struggling with. In fact, I've been struggling with it for a while. So this week, I'm not just setting you a challenge, I'm setting me a challenge. Relationship building is definitely one of the most important parts of business success, both online and offline. As customers, we want to get to know the people we do business with before we hire them, before we buy for them. And we want to continue those relationships if we're going to keep buying from them. It can take months, even years, for a business to build a relationship. But you know what? When they finally bloom, you have an ally and a customer for life. When I'm asked about building relationships online, the tools that come to mind are usually Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. But there's one tool I know I'm neglecting, and that is blog commenting. You're listening to Blogcentric from Spiderworking. Blog commenting, and by that I mean actually proactively going out there and posting meaningful comments on other people's blogs, is an amazing way to build relationships with influential people in your industry. So why don't I do it more? Well, it's time consuming, and we all know as small business owners, we've tons of time, right? Yeah, no, we don't. It's so much easier to send a 140 character tweet or leave a quick comment on a Facebook post than it is to compose a decent comment in response to a blog post. To leave a good comment, you have to read the blog post, find something worthwhile saying, compose your response, and if you're me, you need to spell check and proofread about 5 times. It's a lot of work. Even thinking about that's enough to make me want to put it on a long finger. Procrastinate. Is the effort worth it? Well, actually, sometimes it might not be. There's a blog I follow. I think I found it because it also talks about blogging. When I went to the site, I was impressed. She had loads of comments. Immediately, I was envious. Green, I was. Why didn't I get that many comments? Well, I followed her blog in an attempt to find out. And of course, I'd made the classic mistake. I'd looked at the numbers, but I hadn't looked at the comments. And when I did, I started to wonder why people were commenting. The comments weren't bad. They were just meaningless. In fact, there are only a few bloggers, when you look closely, out there that seem to get really good quality comments on their blogs. So what was going on with that blogger I was following? Well, I can't be 100% sure, but it looks like they were in a comment ring. That sounds really shady, doesn't it? What is a comment ring? Well, it's not. It's just a group of people who get together and comment on each other's blogs in order to grow the number of comments they get. And I'm not totally anti this idea. I had a comment ring. I didn't know that was what it was called. I think there were 4 people in it, and the idea was that if we commented on each other's blogs, new people would come along, see the comments, and be encouraged to comment themselves. Now, that didn't last very long. In fact, it didn't really work either. I was still getting mostly just comments from people in the ring. I also run a comment thread in the Small Business Bloggers Facebook group. The idea is you leave a comment on somebody's blog and they leave a comment on somebody else's blog. Now, this I have found useful because we're a small supportive group, and I'm finding that people leave comments even when it's not the allotted thread date, even when we're not asking for comments, because people are interested and supportive and they're leaving good comments. And it's made me want to leave better comments as well. So it's trained me. All this is great, but as a small business, I do think we need to be more strategic with our commenting. A couple of weeks ago, I listened to a copy blogger podcast hosted by Sonia Simone. It was called How to Write Much Better Blog Comments. And I took that as a call to arms, as an inspiration. I am going to write much better blog comments. You're listening to Blogcentric from Spiderworking. So why should we bother commenting? Building relationships with potential customers should be one of the most important goals you have and I have as a small business owner. Blogging and social media are great for this. You can get to know your customers, you can assess their needs, you can find out what problems they face, and you can produce content that answers those problems. The thing is, you're only reaching one person at a time. Now, I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that you should stop building relationships one-to-one with customers. But what I am suggesting is that you should take some of the time you assign to that and use it for building relationships with the people who influence your customers. This isn't really a new concept. I'm sure if you're in business, you've already started building a list of press contacts that you'll send press releases to. And you'll know that if you get to know the people better before you send the press releases, they're more likely to give them a look. Well, it's the same with influencers, except you don't need to send them press releases. You just need to get to know them and make sure you're providing valuable content, and they could start talking about you without needing to be prompted. Now, instead of reaching your customers one by one, if the right influencer shares your stuff, you'll be reaching a whole bundle of your customers at once. Even better, because the influencer is a trusted source of information, you'll become trusted too. And building relationships with influencers goes beyond them just sharing your content. If you become friends with the smart people in your industry, you'll learn a whole lot from them that's going to benefit you and your customers in the future. If they know your customers or people like them, they're going to have great insights into what makes them tick. So if I've managed to persuade you to give it a go, don't just start on a comment frenzy. That's one of the downsides of the comment rings I talked about at the beginning. Using blog commenting effectively is going to take time, so you're going to need a plan. You're listening to Blogcentric from Spiderworking. I think when people hear the term influencer, they think Kim Kardashian, or maybe one of the other Kardashians, but they're not going to be any use to most of you. When I talk about influence, I'm really talking about the individuals who appeal to your target market and complement your business. And you're going to need to choose these carefully. If you haven't spent time creating a basic customer persona yet, go do it before you start. I covered that back in episode 14, and I'll link to that show in the show notes. Now you've got your persona, go do your research. What blogs and online publications do they read? Which do they look at the most? Make a list of the blogs that will be relevant to your persona. If you've been following this podcast, you might have already discovered a lot of these. Just look back to episode 62, where we looked at content discovery. Again, I will leave a link in the show notes. Once you've compiled your list, subscribe to those blogs in Feedly or by email so that you don't miss them. The next step is to set a time. I'm a big believer that if you don't set a regular time to do something, it won't happen. Or at least it won't happen enough. This, I admit, has been part of my problem. So I'm going to set mine now. Right now, I'm telling you, so you have to hold me to account, that Monday, which is my content day, at 12 noon, just before lunch, I'm going to do my commenting. I'm going to allow half an hour and lunch is my reward. Now it's your turn. Go get your diary, your iPhone, your Android, your Google Calendar, wherever you set out your time, and set a day and time that you're going to do this and set a reminder. Right, so far you have a list of blogs that you want to comment on. You have a schedule. The next bit is the hard bit. It's the writing of the comments. If you're a natural born writer or a natural conversationalist, you're going to find this bit easy. If, like most of us, you're not, it's going to be a bit more challenging. So before you start typing, remember why you're doing this. It's not just a challenge for you. You actually want to build some sort of relationship with the blogger, and for that reason, you're going to need your comment to stand out, to get noticed. So read the post. What's at the heart of it? What's the key message? Do you agree or disagree with that? It's okay to disagree. Do you have an anecdote that supports the post or otherwise? Does the post tap into an emotion? And how does that make you feel? What are the other commenters on the post saying? Take these as cues for your own comments. If you can write a blog post, you can write a good comment. And don't just type your response straight into the comment box. Take a few minutes to craft it in a document or a writing application. There's nothing worse than crafting a great comment, hitting publish, and an error message comes up. Your message has disappeared and it will never return. A website glitch has killed your hard work. So write your comment in a writing tool. I use Written Kitten, as you know, beforehand. And this also, for me, helps with the spelling because I tend to type too quickly. I'm spelling challenged in the first place. My comments are easily full of errors unless I check. So when I type it into Written Kitten and read it back, there's little red lines underneath with the typos, but a good read through will pull out more as well. That means that I'm not looking like an idiot when I post it. Saves all the embarrassment. And finally, when you go to post, usually the software will insist that you give them some information. So you will give it your name, you will give it your email address, which isn't publicly visible, and you can give it a website if you have one. So add all that information, because if you write a good comment, that blogger might want to go back and look at your blog. Definitely worth doing. If you're prompted to sign in for follow-up comments, do. Because you've opened a conversation here. Make sure you can see when people respond. I'm not going to go any deeper into writing comments because I think that Sonia Simone's post that I mentioned earlier just goes into it perfectly. So I'm going to link that in the show notes.
You're listening to Blogcentric from Spiderworking.
Right, so I'm all set. Monday, 12 noon. I'm going to start my new blog commenting action plan. I have a list. I have a time. I'm determined to leave good comments. Will you join me? If so, that's your challenge. And if you join my challenge, let me know. I'd also love to know if you've had any good results from leaving quality comments on people's blog posts in the past. So you know what? You could leave me a comment on the blog post about that. Before you go, I would love if you left me, not a comment, well, a comment's great, but I'd love it if you left me a review on iTunes or Stitcher, because when people find my podcast and they see good reviews, they're more likely to give it a listen themselves. So go over to iTunes now, go over to Stitcher or wherever you listen to this podcast and tell people if you enjoyed it. And that's all for me from this very short podcast this week. I will return next week. Until then, happy blogging.
Blogcentric from Spiderworking is sponsored by We Teach Social, social media e-learning courses for small business. Find out more at weteachsocial.com.